What is happening? Chronic disease has gone from 12.8% in our children in the 1980s to over 54% of our kids now. That's the greatest decline in human health that's ever been recorded. And people will say, how do you know it's not the pesticides sprayed all over our crops or the hormones in our beef or plastics or forever chemicals? But when we're talking about an autoimmune disease crisis, which is what's happening in America, shouldn't we look closest at the one product that's designed to alter our immune system for life? And we don't just inject it 1 time or 2 times or 10 times or 15 times or 20 times or 50 times. 72 times we are altering the immune system for our children with our vaccine program. There'd be one easy study to rule it out. Compare vaccinated children to completely unvaccinated children. But we don't know because they've never done the study.
It's the CDC's responsibility to do those studies, and they've been ordered again and again and again to do them, and they have refused.
This is information that vaccine safety advocates want, and I'm not sure why it hasn't been done.
What we would need is a scientist that the CDC could trust.
There would have to be a passionately pro-vaccine, highly accredited group of scientists willing to do a super robust, retrospective, vaccinated versus unvaccinated comparative study.
As fate would have it, Del Med, the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health System, Marcus Zervos.
Dr. Zervos is the perfect epidemiologist for the study. He's incredibly pro-vaccine, and he's also used to being in high-profile cases because he was at the center of the Flint, Michigan water investigation. Dr. Zervos only agreed to do this study to prove us wrong.
Del and I thought that was an excellent opportunity.
We only had one request.
Whatever the outcome, you publish it. And he said, whatever the results, they get published. Would he stick to that promise if the results show that unvaccinated kids are healthier? Didn't know.
Impact of childhood vaccination on short and long-term chronic health outcomes in children, a birth cohort study. I've never seen this study before.
18,468 subjects.
Henry Ford, like other institutions, has a bias towards the goodness of vaccines. If the results came back demonstrating that the battery of vaccines was associated with chronic diseases, such a result would be particularly convincing. This could be essentially one of the most valuable studies in the field.
The vaccinated subjects were over 4 times more likely to have an asthma diagnosis.
600% more acute and chronic ear infections.
4.47 times the amount of speech disorders in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated.
5.5 times risk.
616% increase. Learning issues, developmental delays, speech delays, language delays.
Amongst the unvaccinated group, there were 0.
There was 0 brain dysfunction, 0 diabetes, 0 behavioral problems, 0 learning disabilities, 0 intellectual disabilities, 0 tics, and 0 other psychological disabilities. None.
It's a big difference.
It's very important this study sees the light of day.
This is devastating.
This paper should have been rushed to publication on an emergency basis.
We are systematically making kids sick, and not just a little bit sick, very sick.
This may be the most important study that has ever been done, and it needs to be published.
He knows if he puts his name on this, his career is over.
I'm honestly, really emotional.
Zervo's probably going to lose his job over this.
Dr. Rogers is a fellow at the Brownstone Institute for Social and Economic Research. He has a PhD in political economy from the University of Sydney and a master in public policy from UC Berkeley. His research focuses on regulatory capture and corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. Mr. Roberts.
Good afternoon, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the Permanent Subcommittee. On July 4th, 2015, my then partner's son was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. I was in a PhD program in political economy at the University of Sydney, where I had access to almost all current scientific and medical journals. I wanted to better understand what was happening, so I went to the CDC's webpage on the causes of autism. As a PhD student, I was trained to focus on primary source documents. So I read all the references and their footnotes. To my surprise, I quickly discovered the CDC's narrative did not add up. Claims that autism is genetic don't make sense because autism prevalence was rising too fast. There's no such thing as a genetic epidemic. Then the CDC blamed valproic acid, a treatment for epilepsy that is contraindicated in pregnancy, and thalidomide, which was never approved for use in the United States. Finally, the CDC pointed to advanced parental age, but the odds ratios were modest, and the increase in the proportion of older parents is insufficient to explain the surge in autism prevalence. Furthermore, the cost of autism was already in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year in the US, and yet government was not responding with a sense of urgency. I changed my doctoral thesis topic to the political economy of autism and spent the next 4 years reading and analyzing nearly everything that's been written on autism prevalence, causation, and cost. In 2019, my thesis passed rigorous external peer review. It's now in the top 10 of the most downloaded doctoral research papers in the history of the University of Sydney. Since then, I've continued my research with Children's Health Defense as an independent journalist and as a fellow at Brownstone Institute. Here are the facts. In 1970, the first autism prevalence study in the US found an autism rate of less than 1 in 10,000 children. According to a study by the EPA, sometime around 1987, the autism rate in the US began to skyrocket. The most recent report from the CDC showed that 1 in 31 8-year-old children in the US in 2022 were on the autism spectrum. That's a 32,158% increase in the last 52 years. 2 massive studies from the best epidemiologists in California show that changes in diagnostic criteria only explain a small fraction of the rise in autism prevalence. There are 22 studies that claim that vaccines don't cause autism. None of these studies have a completely unvaccinated control group. So unfortunately, if you want to understand what's causing the autism epidemic, these studies are of no use. Then there are 5 large genetic research projects: AGREE, SSC, ASC, MISSING, and SPARK. Together, they've produced 501 published papers. The search for the gene for autism has consumed over $2.3 billion, and researchers have almost nothing to show for it because genes don't suddenly create epidemics. The human genome just doesn't change that fast. Then there are 4 large epigenetic research projects, so genes and the environment: CHARGE, MARBLES, SEED, and EARLY. Combined, they've produced 437 publications that look at the effects of air pollution, pesticides, fluorinated substances, PCBs, nutritional factors, flame retardants, maternal metabolic conditions, and volatile organic compounds. None of these studies control for vaccines as a possible covariate or confounder, so it's impossible to know the true impact of these variables. The critical missing piece in autism research is vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies. Thankfully, there are now 6 good studies that we can rely on. Unfortunately, these studies have been systematically suppressed and ignored by the mainstream media and the medical establishment. 2 studies by Gallagher and Goodman show that the birth dose of the hepatitis B vaccine significantly increases autism risk. 3 studies by Anthony Mawson confirm that vaccination increases the odds of developing autism by at least 4.2-fold. Preterm birth, coupled with vaccination, increases the odds of neurodevelopmental disability by more than 12-fold compared to preterm birth without vaccination. And finally, a study by Hooker and Miller published in 2021 found that vaccination increases autism risk 5-fold. Vaccination in the absence of breastfeeding increases autism risk 12.5-fold. Vaccination in addition to C-section birth increases autism risk 18.7-fold. After conducting the systematic review of 1,000 studies, my belief is that the autism and chronic disease epidemics are primarily caused by toxicants, mostly from vaccines and about a dozen additional toxicants. If we stop exposing children to these hazards in the first place, that would stop the epidemics of chronic illness in children. Now we must summon the political will to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers.